the Dallas Cowboys officially closed their season with a lengthy postseason press conference, and as usual, Jerry Jones dominated the conversation. The session stretched on long enough to blur the sense of time, with Jerry speaking far more than anyone else, something that continues to frustrate many observers. Brian Schottenheimer and Stephen Jones were present, but their voices were secondary. The overall takeaway was mixed, with some encouraging notes, but plenty of concern, especially surrounding the defensive coordinator search and how the organization continues to handle major football decisions during the NFL offseason. Before going any further, make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave a like on this video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Supporting the channel helps keep Dallas Cowboys coverage going strong, and your feedback matters as we break down front office decisions, coaching moves, and the direction of the Cowboys' rebuild. One of the clearest themes from the press conference was how the hiring of Matt Eberflus actually unfolded. Jerry Jones attempted to frame it as a fully collaborative effort, repeatedly emphasizing that everyone agreed and that the decision was unanimous. Eventually, however, he admitted just how excited he personally was about landing Eberflus, even mentioning internal celebration when the deal came together. That detail mattered because it reinforced what many already suspected. This was not a hire driven by Brian Schottenheimer identifying his ideal defensive coordinator. This was a front office decision through and through, shaped by Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, and the broader organizational structure. The reality presented was that Schottenheimer did not walk into the job with full autonomy. The implication was clear. Saying no was never truly an option. The sequence of events made that obvious, especially when the Eberflus hire leaked almost immediately after Schottenheimer was announced, only to be awkwardly walked back later. It felt predetermined, rushed, and ultimately flawed. The Cowboys now understand the stakes. If they fail again in the defensive coordinator search, this entire structure is unlikely to succeed in Dallas. Jerry Jones suggested that the process will change moving forward. He stated that being a former head coach is no longer a requirement, which would mark a shift from the Cowboys' long-standing approach. In recent years, the team consistently leaned toward coaches with established resumes and experience, believing that familiarity and credibility mattered most. That philosophy shaped hires across multiple cycles. Now, Jerry claims that requirement is gone, though skepticism remains until the organization proves it with action. What adds to that skepticism is the lack of visible urgency. At the time of the discussion, no formal interview requests had been made. While there are technical ways around formalities, the perception is that the Cowboys are once again moving slowly. The feeling persists that this team operates in a pattern of incremental progress followed by self-inflicted setbacks. There is frustration with the idea that the search cannot begin immediately, even if it means long days and late nights. A proactive defensive coordinator search is overdue. Brian Schottenheimer later described what he wants from the next defensive coordinator, and his comments sounded like an indirect explanation of why Matt Eberflus failed. Teaching was the first quality he emphasized. He wants someone who can develop players, communicate clearly, and break down complex concepts in a way that actually connects. That emphasis strongly suggests that communication was lacking under Eberflus. Schottenheimer also highlighted the importance of adapting the scheme to fit the personnel, something that became a major issue defensively. Adjusting to the roster should be standard practice, yet it clearly did not happen consistently. Jerry Jones echoed parts of that message by talking about passion and communication, while Stephen Jones focused on vision. He spoke about the current core of defensive players and the idea of building around those pieces rather than forcing a rigid system. The discussion naturally shifted toward the Cowboys' draft strategy and how future picks will be used to support that vision. There was acknowledgement that early draft selections may be spent on defensive backs, but flexibility remains if elite talent is available elsewhere. The emphasis stayed on aligning philosophy with personnel rather than repeating past mistakes. Schottenheimer also made it clear that he wants a wide-ranging defensive coordinator search. He expressed a desire to explore all viable options rather than interviewing a small group and settling quickly. Comfort, in his view, is not something the Dallas Cowboys should be prioritizing. A real search means challenging assumptions and evaluating the best possible candidates, not simply defaulting to familiar names. Jerry Jones addressed free agency in a cautious tone. He avoided making promises, framing his comments around honesty rather than hype. He acknowledged that the team is in a better position than before, but he did not commit to aggressive spending. He also revisited the idea of trades involving premium draft assets, which he presented as standard roster management. Still, it was clear that he values accumulating high draft picks whenever possible. Micah Parsons came up without prompting, introduced by Jerry in an awkward way that only added confusion. He discussed financial limitations and suggested that certain decisions were not feasible, a claim that many view as misleading. While flexibility may not have been ideal, the belief remains that different choices could have been made if priorities had shifted. The conversation highlighted ongoing tension between star power, cap management, and long-term planning. George Pickens was again described as a top priority. The organization has been consistent in that message for weeks. If a long-term agreement is not reached, the expectation is that the franchise tag will be used. Jerry avoided specifics about negotiations, indicating that discussions with agents will continue during the offseason process. There was little new revealed, reinforcing the idea that the plan is already set. Leadership emerged as another central theme. Schottenheimer values players who lead by example and embody the culture he wants to establish. This perspective aligns closely with the Cowboys' long-standing preference for character and accountability. Certain comments were interpreted as subtle critiques of other high-profile players, reinforcing the idea that leadership remains a defining trait in personnel decisions. The discussion eventually turned toward the offense, particularly offensive line questions. Schottenheimer stated plainly that he wants the best possible combination of players on the field, regardless of traditional position labels. Tyler Smith is currently viewed as a guard, but flexibility remains if moving him improves the overall unit. Other young linemen were mentioned, while the absence of discussion around Terrence Steele raised questions about his future. The offensive line stands as the biggest unanswered question on that side of the ball. As the press conference wrapped up, special teams issues were addressed. The assessment was blunt. Performance was not good enough, penalties were a problem, and improvement is mandatory. Nick Sorensen remains in place, but the message was unmistakable. If special teams do not improve, change will follow. The message regarding special teams carried an unmistakable sense of warning. While Nick Sorensen was not dismissed outright, the language used by both Jerry Jones and Brian Schottenheimer made it clear that patience is limited. The problems were not framed as subjective opinions, but as factual shortcomings. Too many penalties, too many mistakes, and not enough consistency defined that phase of the game. The implication was direct. Improvement is no longer optional. Another season with the same issues would almost certainly lead to a change, reinforcing how little margin for error remains in certain areas of this Cowboys rebuild. Throughout the press conference, Jerry Jones repeatedly circled back to themes of control, flexibility, and long-term vision, even when the answers felt evasive. When discussing free agency NFL plans, he avoided committing to any aggressive approach, preferring instead to emphasize honesty over hype. He positioned the team as being in better overall shape while simultaneously cautioning against inflated expectations. This balancing act has become familiar during the NFL offseason, especially when financial decisions and roster construction intersect with public messaging. Trade possibilities were also mentioned again, particularly the idea of moving premium picks to gain additional assets. Jerry framed this as standard practice rather than a sign of any immediate plan. Still, it was evident that he values optionality and the leverage that comes with extra draft capital. This philosophy ties directly into the Cowboys' draft strategy and reflects a desire to remain flexible rather than locked into a single path. The topic of Micah Parsons resurfaced in a way that felt both deliberate and uncomfortable. Jerry brought him up without being prompted, prefacing the comment by saying he did not want everything to revolve around Micah, only to do exactly that. His explanation centered on financial constraints and limitations, suggesting that certain roster combinations were simply not possible. That explanation was met with skepticism, as the belief remains that while flexibility may have been reduced, it was not eliminated entirely. The moment highlighted ongoing tension between elite talent, contract decisions, and messaging from ownership. When George Pickens was discussed, the tone shifted back to certainty. He remains a central priority for the organization. The Cowboys have been consistent on this point, and nothing in the press conference suggested a change in approach. If a long-term agreement is not finalized, the franchise tag remains the most likely outcome. Jerry avoided specifics about whether negotiations are taking place directly with Pickens or through representation, but he indicated that more structured discussions will occur as the offseason progresses. There were no surprises, only confirmation of a plan already in motion. Leadership continued to surface as a defining value. Brian Schottenheimer made it clear that he places heavy emphasis on players who lead consistently and authentically. This preference aligns with his broader coaching philosophy and explains why certain players resonate more strongly with him. Names associated with accountability, professionalism, and vocal leadership were highlighted as examples of what the team wants to build around. These comments were widely interpreted as subtle critiques of other stars, reinforcing the idea that talent alone is not enough without the right presence in the locker room. Leadership NFL ideals remain deeply embedded in how this organization evaluates its core. The offensive discussion returned to the unresolved issue of the offensive line. Schottenheimer emphasized flexibility above all else, stating that the goal is to put the best group on the field, regardless of traditional roles. Tyler Smith is currently expected to remain inside, but nothing is set in stone if a move improves the overall unit. Other linemen were referenced as potential options, while the lack of mention of Terrence Steele stood out. While omissions do not always indicate intent, the silence raised legitimate questions about how secure certain roles truly are. Offensive line questions remain the single biggest concern on that side of the ball heading into the offseason. Stephen Jones also addressed the desire to retain Javonte Williams, confirming interest in a multi-year agreement and noting that conversations with his agent have already begun. The tone suggested optimism and alignment rather than hesitation. While no guarantees were offered, the intention was clear. Keeping continuity where possible remains part of the broader plan. As the press conference closed, the cumulative message became unmistakable. The Dallas Cowboys are at a critical crossroads. The defensive coordinator search will define much of what comes next. The front office has acknowledged past missteps, at least indirectly, and there is hope that a wider, more thorough process will finally take place. Brian Schottenheimer has expressed a desire to cast a wide net, and if he is empowered to do so, it could mark a meaningful shift in how front office decisions are made. Still, skepticism remains. Promises have been made before. The difference now will be execution. Comfort can no longer be the goal. Familiarity can no longer override fit. If the Cowboys are serious about moving forward, the upcoming decisions must reflect the lessons they claim to have learned. From leadership priorities to scheme flexibility, from special teams Oz issues to roster construction, everything points to a defining offseason. This is no longer about marginal tweaks. It is about direction, accountability, and whether this organization is ready to align words with actions. The Cowboys' rebuild is not starting from scratch, but it is far from complete. What happens next will determine whether this press conference becomes a turning point or just another moment of reflection without real change.